emerging corona cases. So I hope you're not in one of those areas. What are we going to do today? Today we are going to do environmental injuries based on a lot of requests I've had from the field. Just because it's getting hotter across the country, and I think it's also kind of time it's due. So we'll touch on that, and we'll talk about some of the challenges of, number one, having to teach a topic like this, and number two, some of the challenges you're going to run across. HRT Medical, my guys. We have a new shirt. It's our Voodoo Medicine logo. It's a nice shirt. I like it. Just got it the other day. Always got to get new shirts. Let's see. Big topic today. Actually, tomorrow. Today is the 29th, I believe. Yep, 29th. So, which means tomorrow is your last day. Well, actually, I'm going to post this tomorrow. So today is your last day to recertify. So if you haven't recertified at NREMT, depending, of course, on what cycle you run, I may have misspoke the last time during the last video. I said you have to go recertify. Let me clarify. Remember, you're on a 2-year cycle for NREMT, so you may not have to recertify until next year. But those folks who were supposed to recertify in March, EMT or higher certification, if you were due to recertify in March of 2020, it was extended to June 30th, which is today, technically speaking. But so please, if you're watching this right now and you don't have all your hours, sorry, there's not much I can do. We can do at this point, but don't let your stuff expire. So please stop watching the video and go to nremt.org and go ahead and recertify if you're one of those folks. Let's see, admin stuff. I'm gonna endorse one product today. So normally I don't, but there's one good product out there that we're gonna talk about. Other than that, nothing sensitive, nothing classified. So what we're gonna talk about now that it's getting hot, like stupid hot, we'll start talking about some environmental emergencies. We'll talk about heat and cold emergencies. We'll talk about hypothermia, of course. We are also going to talk about a little bit of drowning, near drowning, some of the semantics, lightning strikes, bees or stings and bites, snakes, that kind of thing. The difficult thing, let's go ahead first and just discuss the difficult thing about environmental emergencies and having to teach it as one block of instruction is right now this video is being watched by people in Alaska, Florida, San Diego, Maine, Hawaii. So I'm going to touch on some spiders. I'm going to touch on some snakes. I'm going to touch on some marine animals. But I can't cover it all, nor am I a subject matter expert in every piece of environmental situation that's out there. I am not. I know the basics. I know enough to get me through, and that's kind of the wisdom I'm going to impart upon you. There are some people out there who are really, really good at wilderness medicine, austere medicine. As a matter of fact, for my FBI folk, if you go on to the School of Medicine SharePoint site, and you look for wilderness and austere, I have it here somewhere, wilderness and austere medicine, what is it? There it is, wilderness and rural operation injuries. So if you go to the School of Medicine SharePoint site and you look up wilderness and rural operation injuries, you'll find a spreadsheet that was put together by Special Agent Sullivan. He's one of our medics at HRT, and did a really, really good job with a brief overview of environmental, not really environmental, more wilderness type of injuries. So go ahead and take a look at that. It's a good one. Now, there's a lot of good information out there. I've been fortunate in my career that I've been everywhere from urban to rural to desert to the swamps of Florida and everything in between. So I've seen a lot of different things, but by no stretch of the imagination am I an expert at all of them, that's for sure. So let's go ahead and let's start talking about heat emergencies first.
Never got this hot in Brooklyn. It's like Africa hot. Tarzan couldn't take this kind of...
Last time I saw that movie, I said, it's hot. It doesn't get this hot in Brooklyn. Now, I'm not from Brooklyn, but I just love that. All right, so heat emergencies. Heat cramps, heat exhaustion, heat stroke. We'll talk about all of them. And I'm going to put up a couple of slides that are going to discuss numbers, specific numbers. If your patient's, you know, temperature is this, it's, you know, treat them like that. If you're, how do you know? You don't. Pre-hospitally, we just don't. They sell all kinds of cool things, tympanic thermometers and little strips that go across the forehead and treat their signs and symptoms. Right. A lot of what we're going to talk about in heat emergencies is prevention. That's the biggest thing, is prevention. And how to prevent heat emergencies. That's probably, as a medic for you, medic for your team, heat prevention is going to be the biggest thing. If you can prevent a lot of your guys and girls from going down hard on heat emergencies, you're doing your job. So if you're doing no heat emergency care at all for your team, you've done your job well. So we'll talk about that. So real quick, let's put this up. We'll talk about numbers. So we're talking about 108 down to 77 degrees. Everything in between. 98.6, that's where we are. Right? That's give or take. Life is good. We're happy. So when we start to talk about hyperthermia, and we start to get into the 101.5, going all the way up to 106.7, that's a pretty significant hyperthermic event. So when does heat cramps kick in, heat exhaustion kick in, heat stroke kick in? Well, you can read the textbook and you can look at a number of different case studies. But we've probably all, I shouldn't say we all, a lot of us have had heat cramps before. What are heat cramps? Well, it's just like what they sound like. Usually it's in your legs, you're in your abdomen, your calf. You'll cramp up. Why do you cramp up? Usually it's an electrolyte imbalance, sodium. So the old school way of thinking about this was, well, if sodium or the lack of sodium, hyponatremia, is the cause of heat cramps and heat emergencies, well, let's just crush some salt tablets before we go out. And no, that's not the right answer. Don't do that. That used to be what they did a long time ago. Construction sites, construction workers, when they were out, iron workers specifically, they would have buckets of salt tablets that they would pick up and suck on like a piece of candy almost throughout the day, thinking that was going to hold off or prevent heat emergencies. Well, no, all it did was give them hypertension and kill them over time. That's all it really did. So heat cramps are just that, cramping up of your muscles. Heat exhaustion, and I'll go ahead and I'll put this slide up here. This will get into a bit more of the differences between heat exhaustion and heat stroke. So it's a matter of semantics. And the reason I skip over heat cramps isn't because it doesn't hurt and it's not miserable, but I mean, it's just, your patient's miserable. It's not going to kill them, but they're pretty miserable. How do you treat heat cramps? First things first, every time when it comes to a heat emergency, get them out of the heat, get them out of the sun, get them in the shade. For you as a medic doing pre-planning, you should always be looking at your dew points. You should always be looking at your humidity levels. You should always be looking at your temperatures where you are and planning accordingly. What sort of cooling measures do you have in place? Do you have a dunk tank, so to speak? Do you have misting fans? Do you have those cooling chairs that you can put ice water in the armrests? Do you just have a hose or a body of water, anything to cool someone down? Or do you have a tracker van or a vehicle that is a follow-on vehicle that is always running, always air conditioned? A minivan is perfect for that. Strip those seats out of the back. You got a PFT going on. You got training going on. You have one vehicle sitting there at all times or running with the air conditioning on, and that's your area of refuge to be able to treat somebody accordingly. So here we see heat stroke, heat exhaustion. All right, everything on the exhaustion side, from faint, dizzy, sweating, cool, pale, clammy skin, vomiting, muscle cramping, so they just feel like shit. And there's no other way of saying it. It's just they're miserable and they're completely overcome by heat and lack of preparation. Usually what you're going to find is it's a lack of preparation. Now, we've explored all kinds of theories with a lot of our, I'm trying to think of the right way to say this. During special events, when we have people come and try out, we have selection, and we have other events taking place, whether they're PFTs or selection process, people are being pushed to their physical limits. We ask them to prepare good nutrition, good hydration, so on and so forth. But there's always going to be people who don't prepare well. Now, supplements, whether they're protein supplements, workout supplements, power drinks, that sort of thing, are they doing anybody any good? Probably not, quite frankly. When it comes time to prepare for physical exertion, when you know you're going to be in a hot environment and sweating like a madman, there are some good preventative measures. Obviously, again, good diet, good nutrition, good physical conditioning, proper hydration. If you're not hydrating at least 24 hours in advance of an event, well, you're too late. By the time you feel thirsty, you're already dehydrated. By the time your urine starts to turn a darker color, you're already dehydrated. So you have to stay ahead of the curve on that. And I'll recommend a product here in a minute as a preventative measure for dehydration and electrolyte balance. But for the most part, proper nutrition, proper hydration is going to be key to prevention of heat emergencies. And of course, dressing properly. So when you look at heat exhaustion, most of us in the medical field have seen people like this before. You get them out of the heat, you start stripping them down, maintaining their dignity and their modesty. You don't want to expose them to God and everybody, but you want to get them down to close to trauma naked as possible and start cooling them down. Have them sip on some water. Don't have them chug it, have them sip on some water. A lot of people will give them straight Gatorade. Don't do that. Straight Gatorade is, I'm not saying Gatorade's a bad product, but in its pure form, straight Gatorade has too much sugar in it. It's too much of a GI irritant. It's actually going to make your patient sick and vomit, so you don't want that. So that's heat exhaustion. Is it recoverable? Will they recover? Yes. As long as you get them cooled down, strip their kit off of them, get a fan on them, get them out of the sun, get them in the air conditioning, lay them down, they'll be fine. They're going to feel like hammered dog shit for a while, but they're going to be fine. Heat stroke, on the other hand, that is a true medical emergency, and it talks about a core body temperature of above 103. Okay, unless we're doing rectal temperatures, how are you going to know?
What? Drop your pants, turn around, and lean forward. Okay. So how's this work? You just feel my pulse, or what? What the hell was that?
Poor Peter. That was a prostate exam, not necessarily a rectal temperature exam. But back to the slide. There's no way for us to, really, the last thing you're going to do when somebody has gone altered mental status on you, which is what typically is an indicator for heat stroke, is when they go from heat exhaustion to altered mental status, unconsciousness, and they are just hot to the touch, and they're starting to dry up, because now all the compensatory mechanisms are starting to fail. They're not sweating anymore. This is a true medical emergency. You need to get them to a hospital quick, but you need to cool them rapidly. And how do we cool them rapidly? We got to get the clothes off of them, and we have to start to cool them. Now, the mistake a lot of people make is they'll just take bottles and bottles of water and start dumping them on the patient's naked skin, and it starts to roll off of them. Well, the whole idea behind cooling someone down using water is you want a wicking effect. So what I've found to be one of the best is you strip your patient down to close to naked as possible, take a bed sheet, a single bed sheet or something similar to it, saturate that bed sheet in water, lay that over the top of your patient, continue to moisten it throughout the process, and allow a fan to blow across them. Now what you have is that bed sheet holding onto that moisture, and now you get that evaporation, you get that wicking effect, and the bed sheet won't dry off right away. So it'll continue to pull heat off of your patient. Whereas if you just dump water onto their skin, it rolls off their skin and there's no more wicking effect. So that's really a good, quick way of cooling your patient down when you have to. IVs, yeah, nice. Cool IVs if you can, but that's not everybody has the ability to do that. I'll put this slide up here, and here's my one endorsement. And only because I've heard of so many people using it. I know special operations groups across the country use it. Dripcar, good stuff for preventative care or preventative medicine for dehydration for events. We've done some research on it. It's a good product. There's a lot of stuff out there on the market. And the only reason I'm mentioning this one is because I've heard of so many people brag about it. I've never tasted it personally, but I understand it doesn't taste too bad either. So just food for thought. That's just another tool in your toolbox as far as preventative measures for hyperthermia. At the end of the day, with hyperthermia, cramps, okay, fluids, get them out of the sun, cool them off. You can massage that calf if you want. That's up to you. Sip on some electrolyte solution. Cut that Gatorade. If all you have is Gatorade, cut it in half, 50% with water, and it'll be fine. Cool them down. You can work out that cramp and put them back in business. They'll be fine. Heat exhaustion, that's a bit more extreme. Strip them down, damn near naked. Cool them down. Sip on the fluids. If they drink too much too fast, they're going to puke. And again, 50% Gatorade at best, and watch them very closely. Heat stroke, now we're talking 911, get them to the hospital. They've gone unconscious, they're starting to dry up, they're not sweating nearly as much. These are sick patients. They need extreme measures in cooling, maybe even some ice packs in the neck, the groin area, the axilla, just to really facilitate that cooling process. When you know you've cooled them too far, too fast, is if they start shivering. If they start shivering, well, now that's Mother Nature's way of trying to heat the body back up. Well, now we're fighting our efforts. So once they start to shiver, you know you've gone a little too far. And then you're not hurting them, but stop cooling at that point, because now you're kind of counterproductive, to say the least. Okay, let's talk about hypothermia. So, hypothermia. What is hypothermia? They're cold, right? That's really what it comes down to. They're cold. One step back real quick to hyperthermia. Anybody who says there's no difference between a wet heat and a dry heat is out of their friggin' mind. They have no idea because they've never experienced it. From living in Florida for many years and experiencing that 100% humidity punch you in the face, oh my God, this is a miserable kind of heat. Well, that's one kind of heat. And that's the kind of heat typically that puts people down hard because you're not able to sweat very well, right? The air is already super saturated around you. Therefore, the sweat on your body has nowhere to go. So it just sits on your body and there's no wicking effect. And this is why people in high humid environments tend to go down faster. Versus a dry heat, middle of the desert, as an example. I remember taking my clothes and washing them over in a desert, socks, underwear, pants, shirt, t-shirt, whatever. Washing them in my little ditty bag, and bringing them out and laying them on a tent line. I come back 15 minutes later, those things are bone dry. You try and do that in Florida, they'll sit out on a clothesline for 10 days and not dry. It'll grow mold, right? So yes, there's a huge difference between a wet and a dry heat. If you haven't experienced it, trust me, it's nasty. Okay, so hypothermia, they're getting too cold. You can become hypothermic even in a warm environment. I tell people all the time, some of the coldest nights I ever spent in my life, and let me go ahead and pull old Mr. Game of Thrones down. I tell people all the time, some of the coldest nights I ever spent in my life were the nights I spent in the desert. It's cold. Your body's used to the heat during the day, and it gets really cold at night, and it messes with you. But some of the things that are going to affect your ability to maintain your own thermal regulation could be something as medications you're taking, aspirin, non-steroidal inflammatory drugs, which a lot of us take as we get older. Matter of fact, I got my first AARP letter today. That was very depressing, quite frankly. I'm not a member, but I had a birthday recently, and now I'm getting the AARP letters. Yeah, that makes you feel really good, let me tell you. But other medications you could be taking, alcohol, right? If you're drinking and you're out in the cold, it's going to affect your body's ability to thermoregulate. So any medications you may be taking, from sedatives to a little bit of anything, antidepressants, they will affect your ability to thermoregulate. So you're already going to be at risk for hypothermia if you're taking these medications. So as a good medic, you have to know what your guys and girls are taking before you go out onto a mission, a manhunt, training, whatever. You don't have to be so intrusive that you ask every single, what are you taking? What are you doing? No, there's got to be a little bit of privacy. But just understand that as we get older and we're taking more and more medications for, everyday medical conditions, they can affect our ability to thermoregulate. Just keep that in mind. So let's go ahead and look at an Osborne wave. I just want to put this out there and get it out of the way. For our ALS providers in the room, I've heard a lot of medics talk about Osborne waves. They say, oh, well, I'd look for an Osborne wave in an EKG to determine whether somebody is hypothermic or not. An Osborne wave is a notch, positive deflection on an EKG on the downslope of the T wave. I'm sorry, downslope of the R wave. Downslope of the S wave. By the time you see that, there are glaring red flags all over the place. And us in the field, we're not going to have a monitor necessarily to put on the patient and look for the Osborne wave and the hypothermic patient. So I throw that out there just to throw it out there and say to my ALS providers, yeah, it's in the book. Don't worry about it. It's just not something that we're going to see or look for nowadays. So what is it that's going to drive our care for our patient? Well, again, just like with heat emergencies, we look at the temperature. It's like poor Peter, okay? We're not going to be, doing the old rectal probe to see what the patient's temperature is. So we have to look for signs and symptoms. So just like with heat emergencies, we look at signs and symptoms. We look at mild, moderate, severe. Where in the heat world, we're looking at cramping, exhaustion, and stroke. We look more for your hypothermic patients as mild, moderate, severe. Then we start looking at frostbite in different categories. But how do we really know? A lot of times we don't, and that's the thing. So if you suspect your patient is suffering from hypothermia, again, probably poor planning on their part, as an example. Right? They weren't prepared for it. I'll take, for an example, there was a mission, and anybody, most of you in the Bureau who are watching this probably know which mission I'm talking about. There was a mission up north, northern part of the country, during the middle of the winter. It was cold, and teams were being pulled in from as far down south as Miami, Florida. Well, Miami, Florida, in their defense, they aren't prepared for that. They don't have the gear for that. They don't have the equipment for that. So they're being sent to Nanook of the North, and they're used to, palm trees and margaritas. So not to say any of them suffered any ill effect from that temporary transfer of duty, but those are things we have to be concerned with, and we were. So there was a big scramble to make sure all of those guys and girls were outfitted the right way to prepare them. But preparation in any of your environmental conditions is going to be paramount. So how do you prepare? How do you dress? I can't tell you that. There's so many products on the market. Only thing I can tell you, nothing tight-fitting. Keep it loose, and layers, multiple layers. Now you can go with all kinds of fancy products, all kinds of name brands that are out there. That's great. I don't care what you wear. How about the myth, especially a guy like me, of all of your heat escapes from your head? No, that's crap. They've debunked that. That's not all necessarily true. Should you wear a hat? Yes, absolutely you should. The areas that are going to be more prone to frostbite, nose, ears, fingers, toes, those types of things, you can cover up all of those. Mittens tend to be the best for cold weather, but mittens don't allow for this unless you get the special mittens where the thing pulls back. And so there's all kinds of ways to prepare. So anybody who's grown up in the northern hemisphere, anywhere where you've had good winters or bad winters, however you want to look at it, they know. They know how to dress. It's the people, a guy I went to boot camp with, as a matter of fact, Toby was his first name, good guy. Spent his whole life in San Diego, never left San Diego. Now all of a sudden I'm in boot camp with this guy in February in Chicago. And this poor bastard, I thought he was going to die. He was miserable. Never saw snow a day in his life. He was hurting. He really was. So let's look at hypothermia care. How would you care for a hypothermic patient? Well, it's a lot like taking care of a hyperthermic patient. Get them out of the cold, strip the cold clothes off of them, and get them warm. Okay, that is pretty much a no-brainer. Let them sip on some warm fluids, warm soup. They talk about body heat being better than being next to a roaring fire. And to a certain degree, that's true, and that's more appropriate and applicable to frostbite. So if somebody has frostbite on their hands and their hands are numb, now the closer they hold their hands to the fire, well, now they're actually going to burn their hands, but they're not going to feel it, right? So they're actually going to now have thermal burns on top of everything else. So that's why they say body heat is the best. Am I telling you to crawl into someone's sleeping bag with them naked? I'm not suggesting that. However, is that a really effective treatment? Yeah, it is. So there's also some good after campfire conversations that could be had after that. So how can you treat them? If you have a HPMK, hypothermia prevention kit, essentially. It's a high dollar item. I don't know how expensive they are, but this is just an example of it here. If you're in an area where you think you might be austere for a while and you could get stuck out there, and even in a situation to where you're not trudging around in the snow, if it's just cold and a patient sustains an injury of any kind, hypothermia is a killer. And I don't mean you're out there with icicles and snowmobiles. I mean, if it's just cold out and your patient is suffering from an injury, if they go hypothermic on you, that injury is going to get much worse, much faster. So stuffing them into one of these is a nice idea if you happen to have it. Basically, it's like wrapping somebody up like a baked potato. It's got a foil liner on the inside, has heat packs, sometimes actually embedded into the blankets themselves that you crack. And it really keeps your patient toasty warm. It's really nice. But again, you have to be in an environment where that's going to be appropriate, applicable, know how to use it, train with it, that sort of thing. Frostbite in and of itself, we look at frost nip, we look at superficial frostbite, deep frostbite. I know I've suffered from some frost nip in the past, ears, fingertips, that sort of thing, toes, just from being out and about for, X amount of time. So when we talk about being out, if it's cold, that tends to, cold and wet, that tends to be the kiss of death. So I remember as a kid going out to shovel snow, and I didn't put the right boots on, and I'm sloshing around in the slush, and of course your parents said, you better get out there and shovel. So you didn't care, or they didn't care. So you come in, your feet were freezing, and could you become hypothermic just from that? Absolutely. You pull your feet out of your boots and your socks are wet and your shoes are wet. You have something like that happen, that is just miserable. So when it ends up happening in a wilderness environment or in a combatant type of situation or austere situation, is you're out sweating all day. And now your undergarments, your t-shirts and whatnot, are wet. Well, now the sun goes down and it starts getting cold. Well, now all the clothing that is soaked and moistened with sweat, t-shirt, underwear, socks, well, they start to freeze. I don't mean literally freeze like an ice block, but they get very, very cold very, very quickly, and does your patient absolutely no good whatsoever. Now it's just a detriment, and it's pulling heat off of your patient very quickly. So you got to get them out of that clothes. Even in non-freezing environments, trench foot. Trench foot is nothing more than wet feet that sit for a long period of time. And even in a non-freezing environment, that can cause a type of frostbite on the feet where the tissue starts to deteriorate and blister, and it's just disgusting. It's nasty. So we here pre-hospitally to look at their fingers, their nose, their ears, whatever. Say, well, I think you have frost nip. No, I think you have frostbite. You're not into the semantics of that. All you know is that their hands, let's just use hands as an example. Their hands are starting to hurt. It's cold. It's almost arthritic type of pain. You're starting to suspect hypothermia. All right, how do you treat it? Okay. So there was always that, not wives' tale, but of never, never, never thaw a frozen appendage in the field. Well, to a certain degree, there's some truth to that. Think of it this way. If you take a frozen steak out of the freezer, okay, and you put it on the countertop and you let it thaw, and then you realize, shit, I'm not going to be able to have steak tonight. We're going to go somewhere. We're going to go do something else. If you put that steak and put it back in the freezer, well, now what happens? Well, it refreezes. But now the crystals and the moisture get down deep into the meat and the muscle fibers themselves. And now when these crystals develop, they're crushing and destroying the muscle fibers, hence destroying the meat. So now when you go to re-thaw that piece of meat at a later date and eat it, it's tough, it's nasty, it's just not a good cut of meat. You've destroyed that meat. We are nothing but big walking pieces of meat. So if we freeze, and then we thaw, and then we refreeze, that's when we have some big, big problems. So the wives' tale of never, never, never defrost a frozen extremity or appendage isn't necessarily true. The better way of thinking of that is if there's a chance of it refreezing, if you're in an austere environment and you're waiting for extraction and you can't get out of there and something is frozen, leave it frozen, quite frankly. Because now, what if you do thaw it out and now you lose your fire, or now you're stuck out there for another few hours and it refreezes? Well, now you've just nailed the coffin shut on that piece of tissue. It's going to die. But most of the time, we being within the FBI and most of our missions, we should be in a situation to where we can get to an area where we can get warm and stay warm and be pulled out of an environment where if we start to have somebody who's suffering from frostbite to the point where it's deep frostbite, yeah, we can start to slowly but surely thaw that out. So some do's and don'ts here. We talked about not using fire, all right, for obvious reasons. Don't rub it. If you're rubbing, like your parents used to do when you came in and rubbed, yeah, you could break the skin, but you can also destroy some ice crystals in the tissue itself and create more tissue damage. And it talks about not putting pressure on certain frostbitten areas for the same reason. So if your feet are suffering from frostbite, try not to walk on them, same idea. It talks about using body heat, using warm water. A lot of people would think, well, just run under hot water. Wouldn't that be better? Well, no. The best way to test water, and of course there's numbers out there. You read books. Well, you should use temperature. You should use water that's of a certain temperature. And how the hell are you going to know? That's the thing that's always gotten me. I have no idea what the temperature of the water is. So for me, make it tolerable. So fill a bucket or whatever you have, a basin, with water that's hot enough to where you can put your hand in it, as long as your hand isn't suffering from frostbite too. If you can put your hand in it and tolerate it, well, that's warm enough for them. If it's too warm for you to tolerate, well, then it's too hot for them, regardless of their hypothermic issues. So I hope that makes sense. All right, let's see. Let me pull this slide down. I know a lot of that is generalities, and a lot of it is common sense, but most heat and cold related injuries, most, are preventable by good planning, thinking ahead, hydration or proper layering of clothing. whatever the case may be. That's really the key to success. Let's talk about drowning real quick.
For God's sake, do not be afraid to make me a sandwich while you're in there.
Peter, Meg's been in there a long time.
Boy, you cannot wait to criticize her at every turn, can you?
Go get her!
Well, Lois, I am sorry for snapping at you earlier. You were right to criticize Meg. She could not even handle this simple task. She's in there right now, taking a nap underwater.
Again, can't get enough of that. That's just great stuff. There's a lot of debate and a lot of debate over the terminology: drowning versus near drowning, wet drowning, dry drowning, saltwater drowning, freshwater drowning. Here's the easiest way to think about it. If someone has drowned, they are dead. That's just, I don't care if it's wet, dry, saltwater, freshwater, you are dead. That's drowned. That's it. How do people drown? Okay. They're in the water, they're not strong swimmers, or they're fatigued, they're tired, they're cramped, they're injured, whatever. They go under. We can only hold our breath for so long. Mother Nature is not going to allow us to hold our breath until we die. So we have to take a breath in. There are two categories of drowning, technically. There's a wet drowning and there's a dry drowning. About 15% of your drownings are considered to be dry drownings. And what happens is we take a deep breath in underwater, well, the water hits our vocal cords and they spasm. And if they spasm so tight, and so if they spasm so completely, the vocal cords, that almost no water gets into our lungs, well, that's essentially you're asphyxiated. And that's a dry drowning because there's no water in your lungs necessarily. Well, the other 85% of the population, you'll asphyxiate, you'll suck in water, it'll go down, you'll aspirate water into your lungs, and you'll die that way. Either one I wouldn't care for, quite frankly. So does it matter to us pre-hospitally if you pull them out of the water and they're in cardiac arrest, if it's a dry or we could give a shit less. We don't care. Our care is exactly the same. It's just a matter of who wants to figure it out at, during the autopsy. Saltwater versus freshwater. Okay, some people say it's better to drown in saltwater versus freshwater. I don't want either one. But again, if you've drowned, you're dead. So who cares what you've drowned in? The theory is that from a pH perspective, from an electrolyte perspective, salt water is more similar to our blood and our blood composition than fresh water is. So the theory is that if you drown in salt water, there's not as much of an osmotic shift of fluids and so on and so forth, electrolytes, versus fresh water, where it's a huge difference. So you're going to have a huge diffusion, a huge osmosis. There's a lot of theory back and forth about that. But again, at the end of the day, if you have drowned in that fluid, you are dead. So what difference does it make? Whereas near drowning, it means you've survived one way, shape, form, or another. And I've had a few patients down in Florida that I've responded to where they've actually survived. They've been snatched out of the pool or out of the river, and we've resuscitated them. Those are their near drowning patients. And I've had a lot of drowned patients that were either bloated and floated up on shore, and there's not much we're doing with them, or we got to them and it was just too late. They were face down in that pool too long, or whatever the case may be. All right, so that's really it for drowning, not much else. Living down in Florida, as long as I did, lightning strikes. I think it's Texas and Florida are the lightning strike capitals of the world. Pretty impressive. I guess it's got to be known for something, right? Lightning is just nasty. A lot of the things I learned about lightning living in Florida is it'll reach through a window. It can get you. It can be up to 20, and don't quote me on this number, but it's something like this. A storm can be 20 some odd, like 25 miles away, and you can not even see it, barely hear it, and lightning can reach out and touch you that far away. That's pretty damn impressive. Will lightning always kill you? And the answer is no. It depends. Lightning is electricity. What is electricity's mission in life? To get to the ground. Okay. What a better conduit than you? We are a bag of water, a bag of nerves. That's all we do is we conduct electricity very well. So if lightning comes down and hits us, we are the perfect conduit to bring it all the way to the ground. So in that instance, yes, lightning will kill you dead, no doubt about it. But think about the conditions where a lightning storm is usually taking place. It's hot, humid, raining. If you're outside, chances are you're wet from head to toe. So there are situations where lightning will hit somebody. It'll cascade down over their body on the water that's on their body to make it to the ground. And it'll put them down. Don't get me wrong. They're not going to, whew, wow, what was that? Just shake it off. It'll put them down hard. Could kill them. But these are the patients that generally survive. So if we look at this picture here, this is a picture of a gentleman who was struck by lightning. And usually you'll see this snowflake sort of, it reminds me of axons and dendrites of a neuron, quite frankly. This pattern as the electricity burns them, going from top to bottom, from head to toe. So that's pretty profound. I mean, if you get struck by lightning and you live, you got a story to tell, to say the least. This other picture here is a gentleman who didn't fare as well, probably. And this lightning went through him and out his foot. And that's the exit wound you're looking at, is how it went down through his body and through his foot. I don't know how he made out afterwards, but if I had to guess, I'd say not very well. It's pretty powerful stuff. All right, so how do we treat lightning strikes? We don't. We treat their signs and symptoms. How are they presenting? If they're looking at you and just saying, wow, what a blast, treat the burns. Beyond that, you're treating, it's just supportive care is really it. Okay, let's get into bites and stings for a second. So that was a nasty snake bite. So that's one thing we're going to talk about. Let's talk in general terms here for a second. And then we'll get into a little bit of specifics, but not too many specifics. In general terms, if it crawls on the ground, it can crawl on the ground, has wings perhaps, scorpions, spiders, bees, ants, that kind of thing. Think ice. Okay, if you can get the stinger off with a credit card, scrape it off. If it is there, only certain types of bees do that. Yeah, great. Get rid of the stinger. But if it's bee, scorpion, spider, anything of that nature, ice pack. If it slithers, it's a snake, and it bites you, no heat, no cold, just immobilization. Obviously, make sure the snake isn't anywhere around. Immobilization, and get them to the hospital, where hopefully they can get some antivenom. Now, the big question always comes up with snakes is, should we, if we find the snake, should we bring it with us? No. If the ER sees you walk in with a snake, they are going to very politely ask you to stay outside. If you were so inclined and you killed that snake, I am not endorsing this at all. Some people are very aggressive. You found the snake, you killed it, you chopped its head off. A head that's been chopped off of a snake can still envenomate you, right? And that primitive brain of theirs, it can still react and bite, even if the head is cut off for a certain time. If you were so froggy and you did that, cut the head off and leave it behind, just bring in the body, see if they can identify it that way. If you have a sharps container, you can put the head in the sharps container and tape it. I mean, there's all kinds of stupid things you can do. I am not endorsing you bringing that snake to the ER. We all have modern technology nowadays. Take a picture of the thing, if it's safe to do so, and bring that with you, or forward that to the ER so they can start preparing to get the antivenom. Antivenom isn't exactly handy in all places. Not every hospital has it. A lot of times they have to have it flown in special from different venom centers across the country. So it may take some time. So, spiders, bees, ants, scorpions, ice. Snakes, keep the patient calm, immobilize the extremity that's been bitten, and get them to the proper facility. Any marine life, fire coral, stingrays, Portuguese Manofwar, right? Anything out of the ocean that stings you, heat, as hot as a patient can stand. That's what's going to neutralize some of that neurotoxin. It won't hurt nearly as much. It's still going to hurt, but heat. So just keep that in mind when it comes to different types of bites and stings. So real quick, let's look at this. These are more indigenous to North America. Okay, black widows, we have them all over the place here in Virginia. Will one kill you? Probably not. It's not as, not like the movies tell us. But can it make you really sick? Abdominal pain, vomiting? Yeah, it can really put you in a big bad way. Will you know you've been bit by one right away? Nope. Usually you don't feel the bite. It's afterwards. You'll see the nasty fangs in the bite. It'll swell up and nasty and really cause you a lot of discomfort and some hardship. Next one here is brown recluse. And brown recluse has a little fiddle on its back. There's a black recluse, there's a brown recluse. And your black widows have the hourglass on its thorax. But the brown recluse, same thing. Found southern parts of the country. Log piles, wherever they like to hide. You won't feel the bite, but what it'll do is it has a tissue-destroying type of venom. And on this picture here, this shows a patient who was bit in the thumb, and on day 3, day 6, and day 9. It's a nasty, it's a liquefying necrosis that this venom produces from the brown recluse. So just real nasty shit. Those are 2 spiders out of, I couldn't even begin to tell you how many across the country and around the world. Again, I am no expert at this, but those are the 2 big ones that we're going to deal with as a general rule. Again, put ice on it, treat accordingly based on their signs and symptoms, and get them to a hospital or the appropriate facility. Now, snakes. There are countless snakes. I don't know. You have your pit vipers that'll reach out and touch you, and you've got your coral snakes. We'll see a little bit here in a second. And then you've got your harmless ones, your garden snakes, whatever. So here, real quick, I want to show you these 2 specifically, and also I almost feel it's somewhat pointless to show you these 2 because it's very difficult to be envenomated by them. This is your coral snake. All right, red on yellow, kill a fellow, red on black, venom lack. So there's all kinds of little tips and sayings to identify a coral snake versus a king snake. This is a coral snake. You can see the red and yellow bands touching each other. Well, that's poisonous. That's a coral snake. If you look at this picture here, this is your king snake. Red on black, venom lack. So one versus, I'm not going to mess around with either one, but I have seen coral snakes down in Florida. They call the fire department for all kinds of things down there. And every now and then we get called to a house for a coral snake. Here's the thing about a pit viper. A pit viper, when it is threatened, scared, whatever, will reach out with them big nasty fangs and it will snap and bite you. Now, your older pit vipers have control of their venom, so they may strike you and may not necessarily wholeheartedly envenomate you all that much. How do we know? We don't. We treat them all the same. Whereas your baby pit vipers will reach out, bite you, and have very little control of their envenomation, and they will give you everything they got in one bite. So they tend to be worse. Again, how do we know? We have no idea. Your coral snake, on the other hand, has little tiny teeth and a little tiny mouth. So the best way to describe somebody who is bit by a coral snake is chances are they probably deserved it. Means they were probably messing with the snake poking at it, kicking at it with the open toe, with their flip-flops on or whatever they do, and they got bit. Because a coral snake actually physically has to get their mouth around your finger or around your toe and gnaw on you to envenomate you. So if you hear of somebody who's been bitten and envenomated by a coral snake, chances are, not always, but chances are they've done something to deserve it. Right? Now, marine animals. We can get into 1,000 different types of marine animals. And let me go ahead and pull this king snake down here. Again, stingrays, they break a barb off in you. Portuguese Manofwars get their tentacles on you, the little nematocytes on you. We'll talk about a little bit of that. But any marine animal, sting or bite, heat, as hot of water as you can stand. So again, same rules apply as with hypothermia. Take your hand, put it in the hot water, and if you can take it, your patient can take it. Here's the question. Where are you going to get hot water from when you're out in the field? Right? If you're in an ambulance, well, you don't have a faucet in the back. So again, a lot of these are in theory, but that's the proper care and the proper treatment. Should you remove a barb if it's a marine animal barb stuck in the patient? Try not to, because it has those little reverse hooks in the barb where you try and pull it out, and you're just going to create more tissue damage. A lot of times it's an impaled object. A lot of times it's better off, secure it in place as best you can. Hot water submersion, as hot as they can stand it. Antiemetics, and maybe puking. Analgesia, pain control, because it's going to hurt like the son of a bitch. And get into the ER. It may have to be surgically removed. So don't just start ripping these barbs out of these patients. Portuguese Manofwars and their tentacles can stretch behind them 100 feet. So the Portuguese Manofwar may be 100 feet away, but you end up swimming through their tentacles. It's a neurotoxin. It's designed to wrap fish up, inject them with this neurotoxin, paralyze the fish, and then the Portuguese Manofwar has its lunch. Everybody's happy. Will it paralyze a full human being? I guess if you really roll up in all 100 feet of it, I guess it could happen, but I've never seen that. I've seen people come out of the ocean and they've had it hanging off of their arms, and they are miserable because on those tentacles, they got these little tiny fluid-filled sacs or venom-filled sacs called nematocytes, and you really can't see them. But what ends up happening is these nematocytes will burst if, number one, they're pushed on. Okay, obviously they're going to burst. Or if there's a pH change, a rapid pH change, they'll burst. So here's what you're supposed to do. If you come out of the water and you've got these tentacles on you, all right, from a Portuguese Manofwar, don't touch them. Leave them be. Take a stick, take whatever it is you have to take them, and try to slowly but surely get them off of you without touching them and crushing them. Take seawater and try to rinse them off if you can. Vinegar and water and a spray bottle works well to keep the pH similar in the nematocytes so they won't rupture. If you use fresh water and try and, it's going to change the pH, and those nematocytes are going to rupture. A baking soda slurry afterwards to try to get some of the nematocytes off. Shaving cream afterwards to try and shave the area to get the little... Some are going to rupture. Sorry, it's just the way it goes. And it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to hurt. But you're just trying to limit the amount that burst and gets smeared on your arm as an example. So the last thing you want to do is go, oh, what are these things? Well, now it's on your hand, it's all over your arm, and it feels like you're on fire. Kind of like fire ants lighting your ass up. That's nasty. Let's go back to snakes for a second, though, and look at this one here. As far as snake bites, what to do, what not to do, all right? I love how they always say, stay calm, okay? I love that one. Stay calm. Who? You or the patient? Keep them calm. Call 911, right? Rings, take their rings off of their, if they're bitten in the arm, take their rings off, bracelets off, these types of things. Try to keep the arm or head above, trying to keep the arm or the extremity above the heart level is what they're saying, or keep it even with the heart level. What you're trying to do is prevent it from going to the heart. Just immobilize it. Sling and swath, that's all you need to do. You don't need to get crazy. We're not sucking the venom out. We're not carving anything out. Electrical therapy, all kinds of nonsense is out there. Keep your patient calm. Don't put ice on it. Don't put heat on it. Because depending on what type of snake you've been envenomated by, the heat or the cold could actually potentiate the effects of the venom. So you just want to leave it be. And try to send a picture of that creature, or whatever it is, to the ER, the receiving facility, as soon as you can, just to make them aware, hey, we're bringing you a patient. This is what they've been bit by. I see 2 fang marks. They've been envenomated. We don't know how much. We're on our way. We'll be there in 20 minutes. It allows them to start getting the ball rolling, because 9 times out of 10, they won't have, unless it's like a Miami hospital or a hospital right outside of a zoo, where they're dealing with these things on a more regular basis. They may not have the antivenom handy. It has to be flown in. All right, let me pull this down. Okay, let's see. We have talked about a number of different things today, and this is a very, very broad stroke overview. It was definitely time to cover environmental injuries. A lot of people had asked if I could, and I feel almost like I'm cheating you to a certain degree, because I can't get into very specific topics, because it is such a broad stroke. You need to know your area. You need to know what your temperatures are, what your indigenous creatures are that are going to hurt your patients, and kind of go from there. But that's the general overview. Hypothermia, drowning, lightning strikes, frostbite, bites and stings, lightning. Pretty basic stuff. Okay, let's see. For my FBI folk, how about fangs? Fangs, how about that? That's a good one. We'll do fangs for a code word. That was video number 25. And I think we've covered everything. Yes, we have. Thank you as always. I will see you next week. I don't know what we're going to do next week. We'll figure something out. Stay safe, be healthy, and we'll talk to you soon.